Great, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It is Tuesday, February 16th, and this is Senate Education. Pleased to have everyone watching with us. Committee, we are going to start the day by hearing from Mr. Desmarais, who has been kind enough to take some of the wording that we have all worked on and drafted a letter that we will try to get to Senate appropriations by Friday. Let me update you a little bit on my conversation with Senator Kitchell and Senator Ballant yesterday. It looks like a number of our requests that we've talked about should be in the expedited budget, if you will. So not the big bill, but because of timing and because of need, Senator Kitchell recommends that we consider recommending that they put dollars for literacy, for summer programs, and for higher education access in this next budget round. What I did, I know I emailed everyone sort of the talking points that I shared with Senators Kitchell and Ballant yesterday. And then what I did was I played a little bit with the language and sent it along to Jim. And he has worked out just a basic draft of what we will possibly a version of what we'll end up sending to Senator Kitchell. Senator Perchlik, just jumping on, I just want to let you know that what Senator Kitchell has asked us to do is to forward a letter outlining some of our priorities with dollar amounts, not for the big bill, but for this expedited budget that is going to come up. My hope is to get it to her by Friday. I took the language that I shared with all of you and switched it around a little bit based on the conversations that I had with Senators Kitchell and Ballant. And I think generally, met with completely open and willing to push ahead on those three fronts at this point, which again would be making certain students have, a good, healthy, productive, restorative summer, and making certain that we provide kind of continue the McClure Foundation work, but broaden it, open it up to all state colleges, Vermont Tech, and also open up who should be able to take advantage of that. And then finally, as it relates to literacy, well, let me go back to the summer programs. One of the reasons to get this in that expedited budget is so that parents and summer programs can both plan. And then with regard to literacy, get it started now, allow teachers to take advantage of the dollars that we are going to make accessible in the school district. So, so that's where we're at. We're going to have now, let's see, Jim take us through a draft letter, but we'll have it go to appropriations. Right now, I think it says it's for me, but we'll change that. We'll have it from everyone. And at least everybody that agrees to what we're doing. And then we'll try to get it to them by Friday. So that's where we're at. Anybody have any questions before Jim starts out? Okay, so Jim, do you want to take us through the letter? I believe it should be, Jeannie, I don't know if you have it yet, if it's on our website.
I have it, and it is on our website.
Great. So everybody want to follow along from there? Jim, does that make most sense to you?
Sure, that's fine. Yeah.
Great. Okay. Turn it over to you.
So, good afternoon. So for the record, Jim Desmarais, Les Consul. We are looking at your letter to appropriations, the draft of it. is for the next round of appropriations. And just reading through it, it's from, at this point, Sarah Campion, writing on behalf of the Education Committee to make 3 areas of requests. The first is in the area of supporting students and families that they have a safe, restorative summer, and one that assists students in transitioning back to school and address the deficit. So in that first category, there is 500,000 requests to support collaboration between AOE and the Department of Health to educate parents on the signs of depression and suicide, and to provide information and resources for assistance. Second, a request.
Actually, Jim, if we could just stop there, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Let's just take a look at that, so everyone knows, and this is something I think Senator Lyons in particular might want to weigh in on. That number is a starting point. That's something that really I just put in there. Joint fiscal and others can give us greater specificity this week. And in a way, that 500,000, for lack of a better expression, is a placeholder and one just to get things started. So I don't know if anybody wants to say anything about that, but we will hear more from those 2 departments. We'll hear from the Agency of Education after this, and we'll also hear from Joint Fiscal and hopefully get that number a little bit more accurate. Okay.
Okay. All right. Secondly, to direct $500,000 to the Agency of Education and Department of Health to make certain that children and families have access to nutritious foods throughout the summer. Third, to direct the Agency of Education to instruct districts and supervisory unions to address the needs of students who have been truant during the pandemic and begin to recreate a supportive school culture.
So right there, if you don't mind, Jim, I didn't put any dollar amount. Again, we'll be hearing from the Agency of Education right after that, right after this. And there might be dollars that they believe they're going to need to work with these families and individuals, or it might just be part of their regular budget. Okay, thanks, Jim.
Yep.
Senator Lyons, please.
So I don't know how to ask this question, but since we do have concerns about truancy and other students leaving schools for one reason or another, are we recreating a supportive school culture, or are we ensuring the creation of? So I don't know. I don't want to insult anybody in the process.
Yeah, no, it's a good question.
Yeah. We could just say ensure that there is, or ensure a supportive school culture, rather than trying to recreate it. I don't want to recreate something if it's not hasn't
Yeah,
been
no,
there.
I think it's an important point. And Jim, what we're trying to capture here is from testimony. We're trying to bring students and families back into the fold, if you will. People have been absent. We have a number of families in every district that have been ghosted, or I don't even know how to use that word. I don't even know if it's a verb. And maybe somebody younger on the committee knows how to help me with that. Perchlik, maybe. And schools have been going around and driving to families and finding and talking with families. And so that's what we're trying to do, is to make sure that on the truancy issue, it's, those families are identified and assisted and get the support that they need and deserve. So maybe you can help us with the language there a little bit
Okay.
in another draft.
Yep.
Great.
Okay, number 4 is to request $500,000 for universal after-school grants to provide grants for children to attend summer and after-school programs.
Okay, now, thank you. I just want to look to Senator Perchlik on this. I thought I had changed it a little bit and put some different language in there, Jim, but I may not have sent you one after I talked or received information from Senator Perchlik. So Senator Perchlik, how should that be worded given your experience?
Thank you, Senator. This looks like it was changed from what you sent me before.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry, it is. The grants, yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Great,
Because that program's already up and running. You know, well, it's not up and running. The grants are working, but they don't have any money to do more grants. And some of those are summer programs. So the only thing I wondered if we wanted to have them focus more on summer instead of after school coming. But I think often the same people that do summer programs do after school programs. I noticed Holly's on our agenda today.
Yeah.
She's the one that ran the program. So we could, if we wanted to have any more information, we could talk to her directly. But no, I'm really appreciative of the way this is worded and really glad to see it in here.
Do you have any recommendations, Senator Perchlik, on the amount? I mean, I know, no, and I mean, you've been in these kind of conversations. What's that?
5 million.
So we,
I don't know. It's
I know. No, I get it. And this is where we'll look to the agency, we'll look to Holly, we'll look to others to see if we can get a sense of what, the best dollar amount is. But, one of the this isn't the right message. Well, in meetings on Friday afternoon with joint fiscal, there are a lot of funds available. And so, whether it's for education, health and welfare, whatever the committee, given what the feds have already sent and given what might be coming in, this is where I'd rather shoot a little high and have approps rein us in if need be. So.
Yeah, we could, and I could either talk to Holly and others. I mean, the after school task force is working right now towards a report. So we have a good group to bounce that question off of.
Great. Thank you, Jim, if you don't mind continuing.
Okay, we're on 5. So 5th is to address the shortage of teachers and mental health professionals by streamlining their licensure process and bringing retired teachers back into classrooms.
Again, something that we'll look to the agency on and others, but this I put in there, it may need some wordsmithing, but again, trying to address these shortages. The other thing I should mention is, when I look at some of the investments we're trying to make, there's this pot of one-time funds, and then there is we need to start talking about long-term as it relates to even scholarship. For example, everything we've talked about in this is really the short term, the 1 to 3 years. But what are we going to be doing to really put in systems so that the agency, so in a few years, we're continuing to train teachers on literacy so that we continue to or start to a real process where our teachers and mental health professionals can get some relief from student debt, that kind of thing. Senator Hooker.
Before we leave this section,
Please.
so if you're finished with your thoughts on
Yes,
that last piece, okay, I just want to go back to the nutrition and foods and wondered how that's going to intersect with everybody eats.
Great.
And will this be added on to that?
That's a great question, and I think we should have them in. And I'll also talk to Senator Kitchell a little bit. This might be something that in some ways they are already planning but to address, but I figured we would just keep it in the letter so that we don't lose sight of it.
And with regard to number 5,
yes,
I know that there are bills coming out, I hope will be coming out for loan forgiveness. So that again is a long-term process. And I hope that we'll take a look at that in the coming weeks.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And that's your bill, correct?
It is, and
Yeah.
I just got a something of a fiscal note on it, so I'll share that with
So
you.
I would encourage you and others, we can think about this in two ways. We could, it seems to me that we could advocate and ask for one-time funds for
Mhm.
teachers and mental health professionals to relieve their student debt, but there has to be a commitment somehow in order for them to stay, you know?
And that's what this bill is.
Great,
And
great.
it would, but I'm thinking, you mentioned the short term and the long term. I
Yeah,
see this easing of licensure requirements in the process as kind of a short term thing, because once that's in place, and you know, it doesn't cost a lot to do that, I hope.
right.
But allowing people to come back into the profession and ease the workforce problem now. But as far as going further, going into the future, I think that we need to do something a little more dramatic.
Yeah.
So
Well,
that
and
people
that's
will
what
stay.
I guess I'll look to you for you to add to this. If you want us to put this in a letter, do you want us to use or try to get roughly, again, the $500,000 place mark to say, we want teacher and mental health professional relief that would be use some of those one-time funds and create a system where those individuals that might come to the state would need to stay in the state, you know, for a certain period of time. So that's just something for you to think about, and maybe come back to us if you want to take part of your bill and incorporate it in any way going forward. It just, you know, it could make sense, or you might find that this is more of not a one-term funding source need, but it's more of a long-term, you know, big bill annual budgetary need.
Well, yeah, and that's what I was, frankly, what I was thinking. But
Yeah,
go ahead.
So, can I add into that?
you bet.
I think the latter is probably better. I think having short-term funds is great, and it will kickstart things we might learn from that experience. But I think the bill that Senator Hooker has put in also has promise for some long-term access to new workforce. So, and I think
you're,
yeah.
inclined to.
You know, because I see this one, these are all really, this is not a lot of dollars that we're looking at for any
Right.
one of these things. We know that that each one is going to dovetail with something else that's going on, you know, so I look at nutritious foods.
Yeah.
And we know that the food shelf and all the other programs that are in the state are going to be working to do this as well. But this at least gives us a start. So yeah, no, and they're all good things, no question about it. Maybe we should ask for a lot more money.
Well, that is, you know, again, one of the possibilities that we may find as we take testimony that some of these, warrant more funds. Okay, Jim.
Okay, so we've been through the first category. The second category is to improve access to higher education. And what's being requested is to expand the McClure Foundation's successful work last year with an investment of $1 million to provide a free class this summer or fall at any of the Vermont state colleges for high school seniors and any Vermont resident who is seeking to transition to a new career or to enhance their work or academic skills.
So just some background there. I got the sense from both Senators Kitchell and Ballant to expand it. You know, of course, if you're living in Johnson, might be that Johnson is going to be the closest spot for you to go for a class. If you're living in Bennington, probably not going to drive to Castleton, but CCV is the right spot. And of course, then there are online courses in Needs. I think 1 million might be lowballing, given that I think the McClure Foundation spent about 600,000, and we would be opening it up to, everyone that is looking to, again, transition in some way to new work, a new skill, or enhance, some of the skills that they have. So it's broad. And so I am inclined to think that that would go up, and we can work with some of our partners to get more of an accurate number there. But I think it could make a big difference. Yeah, Senator Perchlik.
Yeah, I wondered if just what the thinking was. I think this is great, but I wondered about, well, one, I assume it's because it's one-time money, so you don't want to do something like that VSAC suggested with the 802 opportunities where it would be an ongoing obligation. But even with that, I wondered if there was any discussion about, expanding it to 2 classes or something, but making it income qualified. Or is that just too complicated? The goal is to make it as simple, like we heard, which is what the McClure Foundation liked.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So I think there are 2 things happening here. There's the trying to reach middle and low income Vermonters while also trying to support our institutions of higher ed by allowing it, kind of opening it up. And so in some ways, they'll get kind of a maximum benefit if everybody's involved. But I think your point's well taken. I'd be happy to direct it more specifically if that's the way the committee wants to move in. But I think some of the thinking around keeping it this way simple, it's going to help everybody because you're going to get just a lot of different people at a lot of different ages going and taking advantage of this opportunity. And you're right, it doesn't get at the VSAC proposal, which I think we as a committee should have a look at after we take a look, a more careful look at after we get this sort of off of our plate and say, all right, these are some of the things that we're going to do with these one-time funds. Senator Hooker. You're muted, Senator.
Sorry.
No problem.
These one-time funds would be good for the next 2 or 3 years. Is that so?
Yeah,
So
and honestly,
I'm looking
Senator,
at the million and thinking, that's 1 year's worth.
Right.
And then, maybe we should look at it that way. But how do we, do this? Again, going back to Senator Perchlik's idea of income sensitivity, I'm not sure that that's not a good idea. So maybe we could discuss that more. But the idea that if this is going to go on for 3 years, then we probably need more money.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think everyone will have Steve Klein and Catherine Benham in to review our work. And hopefully they'll give us a better idea, Senator, of what they mean exactly by some of it's 1 year, some of it's 2. We could stretch some of it out by 3. I think they're still getting their heads around it also. And so when they come in, hopefully we can tighten some of that up and we'll be able to figure out if we can sort of pace some of this in a way. Or are they meaning that it needs to be used in 3 years, but given, right away, that kind of thing. So I think there's still some gray area that hopefully we'll get answers to. And I think Senator Perchlik, I absolutely agree with his comment. We could, again, having left Catherine and Steve on Friday, I thought it was going to be kind of doom and gloom, and I left feeling a little bit like it was Christmas morning in that there are real funds out there now and will be coming. So I think if there are ideas that we want to put in here, particularly for the expedited funds, we should do it. And then there is also the possibility that we wait. Senator Hooker.
I was going to say that the only problem I would have with just opening it up is that, once the funds are gone, they're gone. And if part of our goal is to get lower income students involved, they may be blocked out by virtue of the timing. So, that's my concern.
Yeah, and my only thought on that, of course, as much as we can do for middle and low income Vermonters, I agree with. Looking at what the McClure Foundation did, it was interesting. In a way, they got a lot of people, but in a way, they only got, and granted, some of it was the timing, and we're addressing some of the timing now by doing this in the expedited bill rather than waiting until May with the big bill, and then everybody's sort of shuffling. So maybe what we do is we work in language that says, focus these dollars toward low and middle income Vermonters and make sure people are marketing to those groups. Again, if you're coming from a household with an income of $250,000, you do have options. And if you're coming from a household, I'd say even of combined household income of $75,000, $80,000, with 2 children, those options are limited. So I do like that idea. And is it the committee's wish then for us to rework some of this language now and really direct it to our middle and low income Vermonters, these one-time funds? Senator Perschlick's a yes. Do you want to say something, Senator Perschlick?
No, I was just going to say, yeah, I think it would be great. And I think, especially if there's enough money to do more than one class, because I think that the goal is to get to support the state's system, but also to get some of these students that might not have gone to college to go. And I think it was a good program and got some people to try it out. But if we could, give them more than one class to those low income folks instead of giving it to everybody, that's definitely a preference of mine.
I like it. No, I do. Senator Lyons.
So how this is all coordinated will be important. I think it's I think it's really a good idea to try to capture the low income kids and the first time at college low income kids. They're the ones who really need this. So then, because it's being opened up to all of the institutions, how it's coordinated will be important. And, I don't know, whoever's doing it will do a good job, I think. So I'm not going to worry about all of the detailed administration of it, but having some income criterion I don't think will hurt at all.
And I'm hoping, since it is in the expedited bill, they'll have time to get ready for that influx. Senator Chittenden.
I just want to build on Senator Perchlick's comment. I too think it would be great especially for the lower income students to have access to more than just one course, but I'd add a caveat to that. And I'd say it'd be great if it was like one free course a year. I just think of ways to get that. This really helps them get acclimated to the process of registering for classes and what the classroom is like. And a way to keep them on track, so to speak, is to say, we'll give you one class for a year. So if they want to take longer, they can, but if they start to see the benefit, they can accelerate more. It's a way like rewards programs can often work, where you'll get, a bunch of rewards every year or so to keep you in the program. So I'm all for expanding the accessibility of these resources for students, especially on the lower income. I just think it's nice to pace it out over multiple years.
I'll let someone else respond to that, not having ever received an award growing up. Is there somebody else that, Senator Lyons, you strike me as having had a more successful academic childhood than I.
What's the question? Did I get an award?
No, the question is, and I think that some of this will have to be settled by joint fiscal. Should we pace this out, or should we say, listen, you're graduating or you're going back to school, you're coming from a family, a household income, you're on your own, you're making $25,000. Do we want to give you one course per term, or do we want you to enroll? Like literally get the ball rolling. My instincts say enroll, just that's where I am. Take 2 or 3 classes, see what it's like. These funds, again, we'll have to determine even if funds would be available, the following year. But thinking that these are one-time funds, get your 3 classes in and work to build off of it. Work with your advisor, work with the financial aid office. I feel like, in a way, if you've got those 3 classes, you've walked out with, doing pretty good work. You might be ready to, again, take those next steps. Senator Lyons.
Oh, I agree with you on that. One course is nice, but it doesn't give the whole flavor for the college and what it can mean.
Senator Perschlick.
And if we have time, maybe we can hear from BSAC or one of the colleges that are dealing with these students, and maybe they'd say, like, this is our experience, like,
yeah,
whether one or more, they might have some real world advice for us on it.
Yeah, great. Senator Hooker.
I was going to say the same thing, because there are people who, might take this as an opportunity just to see if college is something that they can handle,
Yeah.
if college is something that they want to pursue. So I don't know whether we can put it in so that it's either or.
What do you
And
mean?
I would say, one course a semester or something.
I was thinking, again, we'll hear from joint fiscal, but if these are one-time funds and they say, listen, these particular ones for higher ed have to be used right away, I think we just say, go for the gold, take 2 or 3 classes and that first term, and just feel like you've got this college experience and something that you can build off of. If all of a sudden they say, no, you could spread this out over the next 3 years, then we can rework things. But for now, I think, we try to put in there something around, and we can work with VSAC, but who are we really directing these funds to? And I'm thinking families with household incomes of $75,000 and less, and also thinking that, allowing them to take up to 3 classes. I mean, the reason I put 75 in there and not 50 is, 50s, probably our most neediest Vermonters, but, a lot of those students can also pull from Pell Grants and other things. I think I remember some testimony where people said, it's the $75,000, $80,000 combined household income that sounds pretty good if you don't have any children and, you're kind of doing your thing. But $75,000 to $80,000 combined household income, that's when kids are really, some parents might have some of their own college debt left over. They're trying to balance things out. And I think open it up to that group is important. Senator Lyons.
So I was just going back to thinking about the number of courses, and I think there will be some self-selection. A lot of these kids are going to be working, and they're going to be working full time, regardless of how much tuition support they get.
Yeah.
So, so in my experience, there is some self-selection, but on the other hand, the institutions that we're talking about have very strong support systems. So if they're going to be wrapping their arms around these kids, there's no question about it. So
which is great. Yeah.
I think let it play out.
Yeah, I think it's some real exciting possibilities. And likely we'll have to increase that amount. Senator Perchlik.
I think a key question is whether this is the last dollar or more like the foundation program where they didn't worry about that, because that adds complexity. So for those families that already get a full ride, you just say, don't worry about it. We're just going to make this free, and the state just get billed directly from the state colleges, or is it like a last dollar grant for that student? You know what I mean?
Would you say something more about that? Because I do remember this conversation. Give me an example.
So there's either first dollar or last dollar. I don't know if there's a middle. I don't know if there's a middle dollar program, but the last dollar just kind of leverages any other grants or assistance that they can get. So to make it's still free, but this program would just pay whatever's left after all the other, programs that are funded. And but it's more complicated, because then you have to say, okay, what else can this one student get? And then you say, okay, what's left? We'll pay that. What the McClure Foundation says, we're not going to get into that. We're just going to, community colleges is going to tell us how many people are in the class, and we're going to pay 100% of it and not have to try to jump through those hoops. So maybe if you're trying to spend the money quicker and simpler, you just say it's first dollar and it's 100%. But if you're trying to make it last longer and leverage more, then you would make it last dollar.
Yeah, I'm inclined to make it first dollar, spend it, get.
Right. And like you had said, we don't need to figure it out today, right? So if we could kind of get some advice from VSAC and others.
VSAC, yeah, I'll try to get VSAC in maybe even tomorrow. I know that Dr. Boucher is eager to testify, which I certainly appreciate. So let's just look at this last one, Jim, if you don't mind, and then we'll shift to get Dr. Boucher's thoughts and then go from there.
Okay, so the last category is to approve literacy. So first of all, it observes that the SBAC test taken every year by students in grade 3 through 8. Only 50% of third graders were deemed proficient in 2019. And that proficiency percentage is between 50 and 57% for the remaining grades. And the request is for appropriation of $500,000 for the Agency of Education to distribute funds to school districts and SUs for literacy training for teachers.
Yeah, this is something we've had a long conversations about. And unless somebody has any immediate questions, comments, or edits, we'll let Dr. Boucher from the agency start to weigh in a little bit with the agency, her thoughts and the agency's thoughts on this work, as well as other general thoughts moving forward as it relates to a post-summer or post-COVID life for our youngest Vermonters. Okay, Dr. Boucher, I do apologize. The committee, some people are saying it's the brightest group. I tend to agree with that. So there are a lot of questions, lots of good energy.
No apologies necessary,
right.
Chair Campion. I truly was a little confused.
Yeah.
So I have not I'm happy to talk about these ideas, but I have not had a chance to review the document that you're talking about. So what I came today to,
sorry to interrupt. We sent it to Secretary French, and I believe he had written back that he was going to be here today to testify on it, but that might not be the case.
I apologize. Yes, he actually, he got pulled into another, I think perhaps a meeting with the governor. So I apologize. So that's part of the confusion. It's on our part. But what I wanted to share is what we're planning and will be doing around recovery from COVID. And
Sure.
I think that you will be hopefully pleased with much of it, because I think that there's significant overlap in terms of what you've all been discussing and talking about and sort of chewing on already this afternoon. So for the record, Dr. Heather Boucher, Deputy Secretary for Education. And I am going to go ahead and share my screen because Jeannie has wonderfully been able to set that up. Can everyone see that? Yes? Okay. Yes, folks can see it?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. So this committee certainly knows that in our Constitution, the state bears responsibility to ensure equitable access for all of our children. And in terms of the document that you were just reviewing, that's very clear that a lot of that, if not all of those points, were directly relevant to this issue. So as a result of what we've experienced around the COVID pandemic response, we're really concerned about existing equity gaps and that they may have widened. We also are very curious about and also anticipate that the impact of the pandemic on students will likely relate to and vary depending on the region of the state that we're talking about, depending on the existing community resources and characteristics, obviously before the pandemic, will also depend on the quality of the remote learning, the hybrid learning, the in-person implementation, all of which, there was no standard, as you know, for each of these particular paradigms other than for the LEA to stand them up under an emergency order. And then also student and family characteristics and your points that you were talking about covered much of those. The other thing I would say is that we have to keep in mind, because we keep hearing it from educators in particular, that some students have actually excelled in the novel education paradigms that are occurring. We don't know the extent to which that intersects with equity gaps, and my hunch is that it will. And so it is important for us to know and to acknowledge that some students have excelled. I would argue if the students who have excelled were the students who were already privileged, then that's important to know. But I think it again reifies that we need to really make sure we're attending to our most vulnerable students as we move forward. We don't know that though. It's possible that some students of more underserved populations have excelled. One example I'm thinking of is some students who had social anxiety about school. We have heard that many students are really joyous about remote and hybrid learning because their social anxiety about having to show up to school has gone away because they no longer have that as an issue. Oops. Sorry about that. Okay, so when we're talking about education recovery, just to clarify what the Agency of Education has in mind, it's really to mitigate the impact of the pandemic on a variety of different outcomes, and I'll talk about those in just a sec. There are 3 key domains that we're going to hold our local systems accountable for in a way that we want them to pay specific attention to them, each of these domains, do a needs assessment in them, and then make some decisions about how they're going to address those by the spring. Sorry about this. My arrows are not working really well, so I apologize. Huh. Okay, sorry. I was clicking on the wrong type of arrow and it just wouldn't move. So this is our conceptual model for recovery that I was just mentioning. So there are 3 buckets that we're going to require our local education agencies, that is our districts, and then the schools that are part of those districts, to really focus on: mental health and well-being, re-engagement and truancy, and then, of course, academic success and achievement. And so some of this you may have heard talking about pieces of this. For instance, a few weeks ago, there was a lot of discussion of learning loss, and that's important. But many of us who are in the field or who know this area pretty well, as many of you do, understand that you can't really talk about learning loss and just focus on that. You actually have to make sure that students are socially, emotionally healthy, they're mentally healthy, and they have, functional overall good well-being. Likewise, as Chairman Campion, you had mentioned, there's a separate, which we think is a separate but related topic that needs significant attention, which is just the aspect that you were talking about, so-called ghosting, ghost students. And truancy really is on a continuum. So what we've seen so far, or hear about, I would say, so far, is a continuum of disengagement. So this might look at one level like students are not as passionate about completing their homework, they're not paying as much attention in either their in-person classes or in their remote learning paradigms. Or it could be as extreme as they are just completely disengaged. No one can get in contact with the family. That's when I think you're seeing kind of creative out-of-the-box solutions, as you mentioned, Chairman Campion, around who is actually physically going out to see if they can actually locate students. One anecdote that I also find interesting to keep in mind is that for some students, particularly some of our more vulnerable students in high school, I'm thinking, so some students are not showing up for kind of regularly scheduled, let's just say, a math exam. And when folks try to understand what's going on, it's that the student is actually working. So the student is actually working a part-time job because both parents have lost their jobs and there's no one who can actually keep food on the table. So we need a system moving forward that can actually acknowledge that we're still in a pandemic. And if we're expecting all students to kind of fit that one size fits all model, that's actually failing them the most. So for instance, if a student has the choice of, I'm going to go into my 1 p.m. In-person math class because that's all that's offered, or I'm getting a lot of pressure from my parents because my younger brothers and sisters don't have anything to eat this week. Obviously, the choice they're going to make is something about much more basic needs. So I think we want to just continue to think about that as we move forward. So with this conceptualization, we don't consider any three of these buckets as more important or more central or more critical than the other. They're clearly all related. And we expect that school systems, districts will actually design some interventions that get at more than one of these. We also anticipate that some districts will actually perhaps look better or worse than some of these buckets than others. And that will be part of their individualized recovery plan that we'll be requesting they complete. Should I wait until questions at the end?
Does anybody have any questions as we go through this? If I may, and you may be getting to this, I'll be eager around to see how we as a committee, in terms of oversight, should be measuring success of the agency and evaluating whether or not certain things were accomplished, how well they were accomplished. And the other piece, and this might be something that you might need to get back to us on, is now having seen the memo that we're drafting, what is the agency's position on the dollar amounts? Are there things that you would include, take out, increase, decrease? And I think, for example, when we talked about the issue of truancy, we left that blank. That might be something where the agency believes some kind of one-time funds are needed.
Yeah, just as an aside, I actually was starting to do some work on truancy well before the pandemic took root, because we have some pretty outdated statute on truancy. So I'd love to come back when we're not in COVID and talk about some of the more sustained work we need to do. A lot of that has to do with aligning processes better between education, DCF, and even mental health. Because you may be aware so Title 16 has very limited information on absences, and that's what schools and districts have to go by in terms of how they look at truancy. The DCF and in their core title has a piece that's more about CHINs, children in need of supervisions. And so they don't really speak well to each other, those two pieces of statute. And in my view, and in a lot of folks' view, it's a system now that has become pretty broken in a lot of areas. There's huge gaps in terms of who is actually doing what, like who's on first, kind of. So, and then that's also, I would argue, that's from a very legally almost punitive system. And I think we're all in agreement, and it sounded like from your comments earlier, that the way out of a longstanding truancy problem is not to send families to court necessarily. It's to really build these wraparound services that get students engaged in a way that makes them want to come to school, makes them want to do well, and so on and so forth. So I'm happy to come and talk about that at any time as well. But today, I just want to be focused. That's actually, though, why this is one of our core areas in the recovery planning as well.
Right.
So I'm not sure if the committee has taken any testimony yet on sort of like what's happening in terms of student outcomes. If so, I might blast through this part, but if not, I could kind of walk through a few of these, which are probably pretty important.
So are these early indications that are being seen?
Yes.
Witnessed at this point? So it
yes.
is, okay. So
yes.
These are things that are happening. So I think it would be good to review these.
Yeah, but I think that's a great point. So it's more anecdote than actual data. Although on the mental health side, my email inbox was blowing up this morning because there are a handful now of new reports coming out from Vermont data actually supporting a lot of this stuff that's been anecdote. And I'll make sure that the committee gets those reports if that's of interest to you. So had been hearing about an increase in anxiety and depression. It had already been on the rise, particularly in our adolescents before COVID-19, and we're seeing a much an even increased slope in what that looks like right now. There has been an increase in 504 plans, which are I don't know if folks on the committee would know the distinction between those and an IEP. So an individualized education plan is for students who have a special education designation, so that they would get accommodations under IDEA. 504 plans are more of a general education, but they're in use if a student has a disability. A common example is an emotional disturbance, and that would also include something like anxiety or depression. And so it's, again, a way to get accommodations for students. It's a little bit of a different path to get there. There has to be a disability that has an impact on education. So it's slightly different than a special education paradigm. There has been an increase in emergency room visits by young people for mental health. These first four actually are pretty much now, there's data now coming out. Sarah Squirrel has some report out that actually has the data on these. And there's an increase in designated agency caseload for school-aged clients. This is all since, this time last year. So it's looking at 2019 to 2020. Now we're in 2021, but it's really looking at 2020 data. We also have to keep in mind the impact of the pandemic and required response on adults in the LEA system. So we're framing our recovery primarily around what's happening in terms of student outcomes, because that's what our role is. That's what our regulatory authority is over. But we also have, we're really sensitive and aware of the need for someone to be, taking care of the teachers and the educators, because this is also very rough and tough on them. So we're happy to continue thinking about that and partnering as we move forward. And then again, some students might be doing well. So just some early indications, as I talked about, in terms of that continuum of student engagement or disengagement. Some folks, some teachers and educators, school counselors are reporting increased apathy, like why bother? Really a lower motivation to learn because things are so different now, clearly a decline in attendance, an increase in truancy. And then those, instead of ghost, I said lost students. There really isn't an official term, but I think at this point we know that we mean students who are no longer showing up, and there has been a minimal, if no, communication despite districts and schools doing their darndest to try and understand what's going on with the student and the family. And then for academic achievement, hearing reports about an increase in frustration, confusion, hearing about students feeling that they have to teach themselves, typically when they're in a remote paradigm, reduced motivation to learn, which obviously has an impact on achievement. There's an increase in the percent of students failing. I saw testimony by the school counselor at Spalding High School who, and I don't have the exact number, but I think it was something like 3 times the number or percent of failing grades for core courses from pre-pandemic to during the pandemic in 2020. Have some ideas about what that's all about that we're happy to talk about as well. Then widened equity gaps, as I talked about, particularly for our historically marginalized students. There was some data actually coming out, very preliminary, that the pandemic may have a worse impact on math than ELA, but it's really very early and there hasn't really been a lot of replication of that. And it was a study that it wasn't a full population study. It really was the participants were comprised more of better served students, not historically marginalized students, which we would certainly need to get a good handle on what's happening with them. So the reason I'm saying that is,
can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Would that surprise you, given I think some of this, what we've heard historically in the United States, there always is that summer slide with math, more so than ELA.
yeah, I mean, I think it has to do a lot with handle on what's happening. I think it has a lot to do with developmentally where the student is. So I'm concerned about early literacy.
Okay.
But I think it's very possible that math will see the biggest decline.
Mhm.
But it also depends on how we're looking at ELA. So, is it some really nitty gritty core skills? Is it comprehension? Is it, we just have to kind of like dig deeper to find out what's going on. Right. The reason I'm putting this forth is that I think our approach is that we want the districts to actually do their homework on that, to find out like where are the gaps that they're seeing. Is it in ELA? Is it in math? Is it in both? Is it in some other academic areas? So we will be adopting a district level approach. I'm not sure the committee has taken any testimony on Act 173 and the implementation of that work, which from the agency's perspective has been framed around 4 different levers that are a systemic set of core practice, if you will, that really needs to be strong at the district level to make sure that we can continue to implement the kinds of teaching practices, the kinds of supports that are needed for all students to do well in school. So first, the district really needs a coordinated curriculum. For new folks on the committee, it might be surprising to find out that there isn't already a coordinated curriculum in every district, but it's true, there's not. And some places don't even actually have a true curriculum. It's kind of catch as catch can. So what we're actually really advising and supporting and guiding is that like at the district level, you have to have a coordinated curriculum. It needs to be coordinated across the different transition points from early years to the school age, elementary years to middle school to high school. It also needs to be coordinated across different classrooms within traditional grades, though, because we know that there's some room for improvement there. The second lever is really bolstering education support teams. So this is a process by which students are identified in some way as struggling, as needing some assistance academically or emotionally. The way they are deployed, the way they function is pretty varied across the state. We would like to see a district level education support team for recovery that will actually allow sort of a one point person to interface with some of the state supports that I'm going to talk about that we want to bring to bear. And that might overlap very well with the money that you're talking about. This all has to be grounded in some kind of data, in some kind of information at hand. And this might be back at the holding the agency accountable piece that you talked about, Senator Campion. We're not requiring that there isn't time to require some robust 3-year-long needs assessment. That's not what we're talking about. But we do want this to be grounded in something beyond just, well, I feel or I think this is what's going on. We want there to actually be some use of what's at their disposal already in terms of a variety of different key indicators, and I can talk about some of those later, to actually build their plan on. And then needs-based professional development. And this is a different twist on the usual way of thinking about professional development. So it's really thinking about from the perspective of the district, what does the district need in terms of professional development in its educators? Okay.
Can I ask a question before we go on? Senator Campion, thank you. Going back to the district needs, the coordinated curriculum, is this like a beginning of a statewide curriculum? Is this, why would
No.
there not be something that was more statewide?
Well, that is a great question that I'm only, a very small person in the big cog of our local control construct in the state. So I don't think that there ever has been much appetite for a state curriculum. I don't know that there ever would be. So that's not what this is. We want whatever curriculum the LEA is using to just be coordinated across the different entities within its own district. That's really what we're asking for. We're not interested in having a statewide curriculum like something like Texas has, for instance, where they actually come in and say, this is what you will teach from soup to nuts. That's
What
not
we do have, just for clarification for all of us, we have standards.
Yes.
And standards are what all schools need to meet. Curriculum, in a way to think about it, is how that is being met.
Yes. Thank you for clarifying that.
Senator Hooker.
Thank you.
Yes, Senator Lyon.
So, I understand we're talking about Act 173, but if we put this into a broader context of trying to resolve some of the issues we're seeing with the pandemic and kids and recovery, then to me, it really makes sense to have some uniform policy for mental health supports and related supports. You talk about the team approach, but I'm a strong believer in having some data informed policies and standards that can be utilized at the local level. So they might be used in a slightly different way at the local level, but we're in a completely different area right now, I think, for a lot of this. We're not talking curriculum. We're talking support services, and we're talking best practice for managing mental health and suicide prevention, and the whole issue around social determinants of health that
Yep.
and I know how strongly educators feel about these things, but it would be helpful to have some strong leadership at the state level for local folks, because I think there are a lot of good people out there. They'll have good intentions, but if you don't give them best management practices for improving mental health for kids, that's just going to be good intentions. So they're my 2 cents.
Yeah, and if I might respond, Senator Lyons, I think it's both. So I think that's why we're, again, framing this in these 3 buckets. So yes, the curriculum is really critical for academic achievement and success, but when you talk about social emotional learning components of a curriculum, it absolutely has to do with ensuring that students are healthy and that their mental health is attended to. Part of the rest of this I'm going to talk about has to do with what our approach is. And we actually are in very close partnership with the Department of Mental Health. And I think it would be great if you had them come in as well. We had actually before the pandemic started some work where we were going to identify what the sort of minimum services are from DA to DA intersecting with the schools across the state, because we know that there are a lot of inequities in terms of what students have access to, what families have access to. So yes, we're framing it around those 4 levers, but I don't think that's the only frame that we're operating with. So we're engaged with some funding improvement, or what's the word I'm looking for? Funding redesign, if you will, for BIs also to help move forward with more systemic solutions. And if I may, what we really are excited about is assigning each LEA its own state team of agency professionals. And that's where we would actually draw from our partnerships with mental health, with DCF, and some other organizations to actually help get that sort of very targeted assistance this spring moving into the summer. So it's ready for the fall. So I think that's more what you might have been alluding to, Senator Lyons. And that's part of what our plan is. So first, though, we need to actually get a sense of what's going on at the local level. Again, not take like months and months. That's not what we're talking about. But we need to get a sense of what are the needs. In some areas, they probably have very robust, well-functioning partnerships with mental health. In other areas, they might not. In some areas, they might need more assistance. In other areas, they might not. For instance, we actually have a SAMHSA grant that's piloting some really great combined work in 3 different school districts, Fairhaven and a couple other in the Rutland area that, probably don't need as many fiscal resources because they've been covered, but can still use some additional assistance in terms of thinking through how best to provide services, which is, I think, part of what you might be getting at. So that was all I had, and I'm very eager to take questions.
Thank you for that, because that was what I was getting at. That's good.
Just a quick question
Please,
before we
you bet.
move on. Can you tell us what SAMHSA is?
Yes, I'm sorry. It is substance abuse mental health services, I think. So it is part of NIH. So it's actually, this is an interesting project, and I'm happy to share more with the committee. So it's actually something called Project Aware, and there was a national SAMHSA Project Aware, which these funds had to be awarded to state agencies of education. So it would be kind of like US DOE saying these monies have to go to your state Department of Mental Health. They were doing like a crisscross because they really wanted to focus on building that bridge between mental health and between education. So we couldn't have gotten it, though we together went in to get it, Department of Mental Health and Agency of Education. And so we work, side by side on it together. And the whole point is to increase capacity at the LEA level. So increasing school-based clinicians, but also increasing things like mental health first aid training, UMatter, which is a suicide prevention training, and some other types of getting services. It also relaxes the restrictions because there's some more money there, or relaxes some of the restrictions around Medicaid, because that's really where Department of Mental Health, what their world is in terms of funding. And we've done some good work as a state in that already, but there's still more that needs to be done.
So Dr. Boucher, I guess I'm wondering a couple of things, and these don't need to be answered right now. I would like you and Secretary French to come back either tomorrow or Thursday. What do you need from the legislature? I mean, what sorts of policies? I mean, we can put in requests, request all of you to do certain work, but do we actually need to pass legislation on certain areas? And then I need a response to the letter that you've seen the draft of, and Secretary French has seen the draft of, and have you all weigh in on the dollar amounts. I'm still struggling in some regards with the elevator speech of what the Agency of Education is doing to get students ready to roll sort of post-COVID. For example, on the truancy front, I'm not sure what I would tell, and I could just be missing it. What is it that the agency is doing to bring those children back into the fold, if you will, this summer? What's the plan there to actually do it? Is there a plan, and what does that look like, and what kind of resources might we need? Since that seems to be one of the most immediate needs of the state.
Yeah, so what we will be doing, there's actually a couple of places just off the top of my head where
Sure.
they're doing really great truancy work.
Great.
So there's a great program in Lamoille County that a group of school districts, small group of school districts, contracted with the Lamoille Center for Justice, I think the name of it is. I might have that slightly wrong, to actually set up a truancy program where they have staff that are right now going out and actually knocking on doors. And sometimes they're, they've made that connection with the families. And so they're sometimes
Right.
making sure they have diapers. They're
Mhm.
sometimes making sure, so
Which
to my
I think is
knowledge,
great, and
that's-
I'm sorry to interrupt. I think that's great, but are you going to mandate that statewide? In other words, is the Agency of Education, is every senator on this call right now going to be able to go back and say, listen, the Agency of Education is on this truancy situation. They are putting out a requirement for all districts to touch base with those students that have been missing. And so that's kind of what I'm trying to get a sense of.
Yes, because when they do their needs assessment, they're going to have to actually get that information to us. So I'm sorry, I was kind of moving a little bit forward.
No, that's okay. So
What
yes,
we're not going to say is here's how you absolutely have to do it, because
fine,
that would be
absolutely.
right. Here are some good examples. There's also a great example in Addison County that is a great partnership between their DA and a
Great.
community organization and the schools.
But you are requiring all districts and supervisory unions to do this work.
Yes.
Great.
So I'm sorry if I missed that.
No, you may have gotten it. I may have been the one who missed it. I just need to make sure that I know that I can go to Senate colleagues and say, hey, the Agency of Education is working on this, and it's an important thing people have recognized, and it's in those children who are living, out there that we haven't been in contact with. The agency is directing their educational partners to make sure that those families are being, are having a touch point between now and whenever. That's something we can look to all of you to get back to us on in terms of when this work, will be done.
Yes, but I also think that it has to be a community effort. It can't just be on the schools, because it has to actually be a more holistic community coming together piece. So
sure, but I think the schools, you guys, I think have the information. So I think you're all at the point where we need a point person, and it seems to me that you're the ones that we can look to say, in this August, if there's a family out there that still hasn't, gotten the support, or we're going to come back, I think, to you, unless, again, if you need certain things from us to do this work, that's the kind of conversation I'm really interested in having over the next couple of days, so that you do have the resources to do.
Sure.
Yeah.
So that piece I need to think about, because
okay, great.
We
Absolutely.
were planning on using the federal dollars that are coming in, and I'm not sure, when you have talked about appropriations in this discussion, what appropriations you're talking about. So if those are CARES Act dollars, I'm not sure. The Education CARES Act dollars have some pretty significant restrictions on how they can be used.
Mm-hmm.
If there are state dollars, the only thing I would, obviously there's more freedom with those. The only thing that I would give a word of caution about is, if we're using state dollars to supplement something that has been before federally funded, that could actually mess up our future ability to use federal funds for that.
Sure.
So, and I'm sure this committee already knows about that. So that's just something I want to kind of throw out there. But I do want to make clear that, so those 3 different buckets, each district has to report on what's going on, has to figure out what is going on in those, how many students are actually lost, how many students are truant, how many students are anxious, are depressed, are externalizing and need more, more supports than they have had previously. And then the academics, which is the usual. And I'm happy to come back and talk about this.
Yeah, no, I think that would be terrific. And if you would also, we'll have Jeannie set up a time tomorrow or Thursday to come back and continue this conversation and respond to, again, we have money we have, in talking with the chair of approach, there is money there, or there is not money in our letter that you may believe we need to put in. Again, these would be federal dollars directed specifically at reaching out to those families between, and we should probably put a date in there, between now and, you know, the end of the academic year, to make certain that, you know, children are safe, they're getting what they need, kind of being brought back into the fold of the community. And then we would leave it all to all of you to actually facilitate that with community partners. Seeing no other questions and just looking at the time.
Just
please,
a quick
yes, Senator Hooker,
request.
please. Yes.
I don't think Dr. Boucher's PowerPoint was up on.
Right, I've not seen it yet either. If you would please submit that. If you
I think you said you submitted it to Jeannie. Maybe it just hasn't been put up yet. I don't.
Submitted this morning.
Okay.
Suzanne sent it over. Jeannie,
Great.
please let me know if you didn't get it. She sent it way earlier.
The Senator Lyons.
So you mentioned a couple of places where they've had some good results with the work that they're doing. And it would be really terrific to be able to see exactly what the programs are, you know, just what they're doing. So we have an idea of what boots on the ground means. And then that could give us maybe some idea of how much money is involved.
That's a great idea. That's a great idea.
So and I think I include in that maybe the SAMHSA grant. Maybe we could just look and see what all is included in that, because
I'm happy to provide folks who would probably come in and talk with you about those two particular programs. They're not run by the agency. SAMHSA is,
Right.
but I definitely, if I'm sure both of those entities could do like a half an hour presentation just to let you know what the pieces are. And I know Heather Hobart, who is the director of the Lamoille County, I mean, they have data to actually show that what they're doing really works.
Great.
that'd be great.
Would you mind sending Jeannie and me maybe a name or two from Lamoille and another school district that is really doing great work, and that'll help frame a little bit more of our work.
Yep. Very happy to.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And I can also have our crew come in and talk a little bit more about SAMHSA, if that would be helpful for you.
Sure, that would be great.
Again, keep it really tight, but just the real practical, so you know sort of like what's going on with it.
Terrific.
Happy to do that.
Great. Thanks for being with us. We really appreciate it. And we'll be back in touch soon.
Great. Thank
Great.
you.
Thank
Have a
you.
great afternoon.
Committee, we've been at it for pushing an hour and 25 minutes. So let's take a 10-minute break and we'll pick up at 2:45. We'll talk to a couple of after. Holly Morehouse is back with us. And we also have the Boys and Girls Club to help us understand what some of the financial needs might be this summer. So see you in 10.